The pain that no one sees, but that grows ever larger inside you. It doesn't show on your face, it doesn't show in photos, but it's there, quiet, deep, stubborn. It's that pain you feel when the house is silent, when night falls and the thoughts return. When someone asks a simple question and for a second, you no longer know who you are without that wound. Have you ever felt that way? Perhaps it was a rejection that no one took seriously. A carelessly spoken word that remained etched in your memory as if it were said yesterday. A loss, a betrayal, a relationship that ended the wrong way. Or perhaps you don't even know exactly where it comes from. You only know that something inside you still hurts, and that you've learned to smile nonetheless. This has a name, and the Bible knows that name. Proverbs 14:13 says, "Even in laughter the heart can ache, and the end of joy can be sadness." Carrying emotional wounds is not a sign of weakness. It's human, it's real. And the fact that you're here now, searching for something, perhaps without even knowing exactly what, already says a lot about the extent of your courage. Because emotional healing in God begins right here, the moment you stop pretending you're okay and admit you need something bigger than yourself. Hope for those who are hurting isn't just a pretty idea, it's a promise. And that promise has a name, an address, a story. But before we can find a cure, we need to understand what happens when the pain stays inside us for too long. Pain that is not treated does not go away. It settles in. It starts slowly. A thought here, an insecurity there. You stop taking risks because you've been hurt before. You stop trusting because you've been betrayed. You stop dreaming because you've seen dreams crumble. And without realizing it, the wound ceases to be something he has, and it becomes something that you and pain becomes identity. And that's one of the most silent traps there is. God heals traumas and pain, but first, it's necessary to recognize how they work from the inside. When pain defines who you are, it begins to speak louder than the truth. It says, "You have no future anymore." She says, "You've lost too much to start over." She says, "It's too late." And the worst part is that after listening to those voices for long enough, you start to believe them. Not because they're true, but because the wound repeats itself and repetition convinces. And that is exactly what Ruth's path could have become. Ruth was a young Moabite woman who had married an Israelite. She had built a life, she had a home, she had a husband, she had hope. But then death came and took not only her husband, but also her father-in-law and brother-in-law. 3 men, 3 losses, an entire family broken apart in a span of time that the Bible describes with striking starkness. Her mother-in-law Naomi was so devastated that she even said, "Do not call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has filled me with bitterness." Ruth 1:20. This is an honest portrait of someone who let pain define her. Pain became her identity. It became her address. It became the only way Naomi knew how to present herself to the world. But Ruth made a different choice. In the midst of grief, in the midst of emptiness, in the midst of everything that made sense to leave, Ruth stayed. She spoke to Naomi those words that have transcended centuries. "Where you go, I will go. Where you die, I will die. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." Ruth 1:16. She had no guarantees. She had no plan. She wasn't sure of anything. She only had one decision: not to let loss have the last word. Ruth's emotional and spiritual liberation didn't begin when things got better. It began when she chose to move forward even without seeing the path. And God, who sees every step taken in faith, was silently preparing a story of restoration that she couldn't yet imagine. Pain tried to define who Ruth was. It tried to reduce her life to the size of what she had lost. But God had a different definition for her, and there's one for you too. What if the biggest lie that pain has told you is precisely this: that God doesn't see? Because when we are hurting, it's easy to come to that conclusion. Silence feels like abandonment. Waiting feels like forgetfulness. and the pain screams so loudly inside that God's voice seems distant, almost unreal. But there is a truth that needs to be said now, clearly and without beating around the bush. God has never taken his eyes off you, not even in your worst moments, not even in your longest nights. God heals emotional wounds, and he begins by doing something no one else can do. He goes to the exact place where the pain resides. Psalm 34:18 leaves no room for doubt. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. It doesn't say that God is near to those who are already well. It says that he is near to the brokenhearted. This means that your pain doesn't distance you from God. It draws you closer, because it is precisely in the fracture that the light enters. God restores the wounded heart not by erasing the past, but by transforming what it means. He doesn't ignore what happened to you. He doesn't minimize it. He doesn't say forget about it or it's over. He looks at the wound with the same attention as a father who sees his injured child and bends down to care for him. And in the inner healing that the Bible describes, this care is always personal, always profound, always real. It's not a generic cure, it's a cure tailored to your story. And the turning point begins here, the moment you stop hiding the wound and present it to God as it truly is. You don't need elaborate words. You don't need to be feeling well to pray. You can arrive broken, confused, not understanding anything, and he will still receive you. Because the truth that can heal your soul doesn't depend on your emotional state. It depends on God's character. And his character is this: he is the God who heals. Isaiah 53:5 says that by his wound we were healed. The cure has already been purchased. It has already been paid for. It is available to you now. But knowing this truth is only the first step. The next one requires something from you. No one is cured by accident. Emotional healing in God doesn't fall from the sky while you passively wait for the pain to go away on its own. It begins with a decision that seems simple but goes against everything the wound has taught you. The decision to trust, to draw closer, to open your hand and let go of what you've been carrying alone for so long. The faith needed to restore the heart is not a feeling, it's a step. And often this step is taken in the dark, without seeing the result, without any guarantee that it will hurt less tomorrow. It's the kind of faith that says, I'm not feeling well, but I believe that God is greater than what I'm feeling right now. This fragile, trembling, almost voiceless faith, that's exactly the kind of faith that moves God's heart. Because he doesn't seek perfection, he seeks surrender. Finding healing in God's presence begins with one very concrete thing: truly seeking him. Not as a ritual, not as an obligation, but as someone who is thirsty and knows where the spring is. Matthew 11:28 is an invitation that Jesus makes personally. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. He didn't say, come when you're better. He said, come now, just as you are. And before we continue, I need to pause here for a second. If this message is touching something within you, imagine how much more you will find if you continue on this journey with us. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any content. And if this video is touching your heart, leave your like. This helps this message reach other people who also need to hear it today. Being emotionally healed by God is a process that happens in intimacy with him, in prayer without a script, in reading the word that speaks directly to your situation, in the silence where he whispers things that the noise of the world would never let you hear. Healing is not instantaneous most of the time, but it is real. And each day in his presence is a day in which something is being restored from within. You've already taken the first step by getting here. Now comes the most beautiful part of the journey, because when God's presence truly touches a wounded heart, something changes. And that change is impossible to fake. There's a moment that those who have experienced it can describe but can hardly explain. It's when you're praying, or maybe just sitting in silence, and suddenly something changes. Not around you, inside. A peace that makes no sense given the magnitude of the problem. a lightness where there was weight, a gentle certainty that you are not alone. This is not imagination. This is the presence of God doing what only she knows how to do, restoring what was broken without you even being able to pinpoint exactly when it happened. Inner peace with God is not the absence of problems. It is His presence in the midst of them. Philippians 4:7 calls this the peace of God which transcends all understanding. And the word exceeds. It's important. It means that this peace transcends logic. It transcends analysis. It transcends what your mind can calculate about your situation. It's a peace that comes from above, not from within. And when it touches a wounded heart, the pain doesn't necessarily disappear immediately, but it loses its power to control you. The verses about emotional healing in the Bible always point to the same place, the presence of God. In Psalm 23, David doesn't say that God delivered him from the valley of the shadow of death. He says that God was there with him in the valley. That's the difference. God doesn't always promise to get us out of difficult situations immediately, but He promises never to abandon us within them. And it is in this divine accompaniment that the restoration of the soul through faith happens, layer by layer, day by day, in each moment of surrender. Something begins to change when you stop fighting the pain and start bringing it into God's presence. You stop carrying the burden alone. You stop trying to solve by willpower what only grace can achieve. And in that place of surrender, which is not weakness but wisdom, God begins to work on the parts of you that no human therapy, no friend's advice, no worldly distraction can touch. He goes deep. He goes to the root. And what He finds there, He doesn't condemn. He heals. Now comes the part we promised from the beginning, the part that many people don't believe is possible until it happens to them. There comes a day when you realize that something has changed. It's not that life has become perfect. It's not that the painful memories have disappeared. It's that they no longer carry the same weight. You think about what hurt you, and instead of a paralyzing pain, you feel something different. Perhaps a quiet longing, perhaps a strange gratitude, perhaps simply nothing. And that nothing is, in fact, freedom. It's the sign that the wound has healed. Spiritual and emotional healing doesn't erase your history, it rewrites what it means. Ruth did not forget what she had lost, but a day came when loss was no longer the center of her story. God had placed a man named Boaz in her path. He had restored what seemed unrestorable, and the book that begins with mourning and bitterness ends with a child in Naomi's lap, the same woman who had asked to be called bitter, and the women around saying, "Praise be to the Lord, who has not left you without a redeemer." Ruth 4:14. God is an expert at creating endings that nobody expected. When He restores a wounded heart, He doesn't return life exactly as it was before. He returns something better, a version of you that has been through the fire and emerged more whole, more aware, more compassionate towards the pain of others because you have known your own, firmer in faith because you have been tested and have not given in. The hope for those who are wounded is not to return to square one. It is to discover that God was already preparing the next chapter while you were still mourning the previous one. Overcoming emotional pain with faith means this: not resisting the process, letting God work in His time, in His way, in the layers that only He knows. And now, before we wrap up, the time has come to deliver on what we promised at the beginning. There's a verse that sums up everything that's been said here. It's not a famous verse you memorize and forget. It's a promise that, if you let it, will change how you see your pain, your story, and your future. It's in Jeremiah 30:17, and God is speaking directly to you right now. "I will restore your health and heal your wounds," declares the Lord. It's not a possibility, it's a statement. God says, "I'm going to do it." Not if you deserve it, not if you're perfect, not if your faith is big enough. He says He will do it because He is faithful even when we are not. Your soul was created to live in peace, not to carry eternal burdens. And the God who created you is also the God who heals you completely, deeply, truly. The journey doesn't end here. In fact, it's only just beginning. If this content touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave your comment below. Tell us how God has been caring for your soul, or what you still believe He will do. Your story might be exactly the hope someone else needs. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and come grow spiritually with us every week. Because here, the Word of God meets real life and transforms. May the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, guard your heart and your mind. Until next time.